Welcome to another episode of Law in the Future Fusion Unlocked. Today's journey will take you inside the engine room of tomorrow's clean energy, where legal minds and atomic ambition collide head-on. The episode title, FELEX, Writing the Legal Code for a Fusion-Powered World. If you want to know not just what will spark the next energy revolution, but how our laws, contracts, and even insurance policies will keep up with the fire, this is the conversation you cannot miss. Let's start at the heart of this power play, the FELEX Special Session Proceedings of 2025, just out of Barcelona. Imagine a global brain trust, 16 top legal experts, joined by officials from organizations like the International Atomic Energy Agency and the European Commission, tasked with one radical question: what does the legal system need to look like for fusion energy to avoid the pitfalls of fission, oil, or coal? My head's spinning with the magnitude of it all. Why, after years of nuclear history, do we need something so radically new for fusion? And what exactly makes FELEX this unique force in the legal and energy landscape?
It's a fantastic opening, and the magnitude you feel is spot on. Fusion is the holy grail of energy, potentially limitless, carbon-free, without the long-lived radioactive waste of its fission cousin. But fusion's legal and regulatory requirements are almost a blank slate, unlike fission, which has decades of laws built around its specific hazards. FELEX was established precisely for this reason. Unlike fragmented or ad hoc committees, FELEX is the only global body laser-focused on fusion law, comprising seasoned legal, regulatory, and industry experts, and it's fascinating for how deliberately diverse it is by gender, background, and legal tradition. Think of them as architects laying the first legal foundations for a city that's still being built, where the buildings, traffic, and industries are all evolving in real time. What makes FELEX powerful isn't just its technical know-how, though they've got legal legends on deck like Ian Salter and William Falk. It's their structure. 6 working groups tackling core themes: third-party liability, safeguards and export controls, public engagement, harmonization of regulations, public-private partnerships, and knowledge management. These are not esoteric problems. If you do not have clarity on, say, who's liable if something goes wrong in a cross-border fusion project, you will scare off investment and innovation before it begins.
It almost sounds as though without this kind of legal city plan, fusion might fall victim to the kind of bureaucratic whiplash that's hamstrung nuclear fission for decades, or worse, that it could grind to a halt in a swamp of competing regulations. What's FELEX actually doing differently? Maybe let's talk about concrete actions. Are these just guidelines, or is there real teeth to the work?
It's not just talk. FELEX's Key Issues Report, their flagship living document, has quickly become foundational, cited as a reference point across the fusion community. It unpacks the wild west of fusion regulation, exploring whether existing international nuclear conventions even apply, or if we need an entirely new legal playbook. One major issue is that current nuclear liability conventions, like the Paris and Vienna Conventions, do not cover fusion. They were crafted with fission risks in mind. Here's a notable comparison. Whereas fission involves the risk of catastrophic meltdown and enormous radioactive waste, fusion does not. Yet, international law is virtually silent on fusion. So if there's an incident, who pays? Right now, in the absence of a tailored legal framework, you're stuck with general tort law and wildly inconsistent national regimes. FELEX is working on harmonizing these frameworks so everyone, investors, the public, governments, knows exactly where everyone stands.
Let's go full thriller mode here. What happens in a scenario where, say, an experimental fusion facility in one country causes environmental harm that seeps across the border? Given the patchy legal coverage, who'd be on the hook? It feels like a recipe for conflict, or at least drawn-out finger-pointing.
You're raising precisely the risk FELEX is trying to preempt. Right now, in many countries, fusion facilities are government-run, research-focused, and self-insured. But as private actors enter the scene and fusion scales up, you invite transboundary risks and legal minefields. If there's cross-border harm, different liability shields, compensation rules, and insurance requirements could create confusion, or worse, international disputes. FELEX's working groups, especially the liability and harmonization teams, are advocating for a common international approach. That could mean a new convention, or, at least, model standards, adopted state by state. Without it, you have scenarios similar to historic chemical spills or oil disasters, where lack of harmonization led to devastated communities, bitter court fights, and project paralysis. By creating legal certainty, FELEX enables both investor confidence and public protection.
Now, it's not just the nitty-gritty legal clauses. Public perception, social license to operate, is becoming a deal breaker for new energy projects. Reading the session summaries, I was struck by how much weight FlexPosts gives to public engagement and social acceptability. Is this just public relations, or does it have legal muscle?
It is far more than public relations. The technical and legal may be impeccable, but if society is not on board, fusion will face the same headwinds as nuclear: delays, lawsuits, and lost investment. Seth Hodl's presentation made this clear. What wins public trust is less about platitudes and more about early, deep, transparent engagement, inviting communities, NGOs, and the broader public into the process from day one, not as reluctant sign-offs. The UK's recent national consultations before setting regulatory paths for fusion and the ITER project's participatory frameworks are real-world models. The UK government has been actively engaging with stakeholders through consultations to develop a Fusion Energy National Policy Statement, NPS, aiming to provide clarity on the planning process for fusion energy facilities. This approach emphasises early and transparent engagement with communities, NGOs, and the broader public. Similarly, the ITER project has established participatory frameworks that involve multiple nations and stakeholders in its development process. FELEX is pushing for frameworks that go beyond minimum legal consultation towards true co-design, where the social contract is baked into the regulatory DNA. Lest we forget, in places like Germany, public opposition reshaped the entire nuclear sector. Fusion cannot ignore that lesson.
But what about security? If anyone remembers Cold War-era spy thrillers, nuclear technology attracts not just scrutiny, but state-level intrigue. Fusion uses materials like tritium, and some speakers flagged dual-use risks. Where does FELEX fit between supporting open science and keeping Pandora's box shut?
That's absolutely one of the more delicate balancing acts. Chanel Chauvet-Maldonado's session hammered this home. Tritium, for example, could theoretically be diverted or misused, whereas traditional nuclear security frameworks do not adequately cover fusion-specific risks, meaning, for example, the Convention on the Physical Protection of Nuclear Material does not apply. Fusion's unique technologies and openness to international collaboration can create vulnerabilities. FELEX is mapping these gaps. One practical step being discussed: ensuring export controls specifically address fusion-related technologies and materials, so that as innovation accelerates, especially with international cooperation, there is a robust system to hit pause if anyone tries to take fusion know-how in nefarious directions. It's not about stifling innovation, it's about hardening resilience ahead of time.
The big money behind innovation brings up intellectual property, a topic where law meets raw ambition. The proceedings show IP is somehow both a shield and a negotiation battlefield. How does FELEX see the delicate business of patents, trade secrets, and collaboration in this race?
It is a fascinating, and at times contentious, arena. In the early days of fusion, knowledge sharing was a kind of scientific ideal. But now, private firms, startups, and national labs are staking claims. FELEX advocates for a smart, strategic approach. Coordinate publications with patent strategies, document every inventive step, and ensure team-wide IP awareness. If you publish before filing, you risk losing patent protection, and examiner skepticism on patentability is real, especially in a field as new as fusion. Multinational projects, like ITER, further complicate things. One country's standard for patent scope or publication might not mesh with another's. Volker Tillman's presentation stressed the need for tailored IP strategies that fit both the legal environment and the business objectives, balancing scientific progress, investment incentives, and fair collaboration.
Zooming out, you mentioned the multidisciplinary composition of FELEX. Can you give us a richer sense of these players? Are we talking grey-suited regulators, or do real-world stories cut through the legalese?
The group is anything but grey. You have people like Mark Lachaise, who transitioned from managing multi-billion euro infrastructure projects at EDF to leading fusion for energy. Wolfram Tonhauser, with decades spent shaping nuclear treaties worldwide. Power lawyers like Jimena Vázquez-Meñán, who's advised on liability for everyone from governments to big industry. And creative thinkers like Seth Hodl, who blends nuclear physics with infrastructural innovation. Real stories abound. Think of public-private consortia shepherding fusion components through prototype to commercial rollout, facing live contract and liability dilemmas. Or the German Fusion 2040 initiative. 14 national projects, half with major industry partners, all navigating a brand new legal minefield. There are also junior research groups cutting their teeth on both the science and strategic patents, with policy mentors prepping them for everything from regulatory sandboxes to cross-border tech transfers.
It feels monumental, but also a little overwhelming. 6 working groups, reams of legal grey areas, new issues from third-party liability to public engagement and knowledge management. How is FELEX turning all this intellectual horsepower into action? What does their roadmap look like beyond these proceedings?
Their blueprint is action-driven. First, FELEX is publishing dedicated papers from each working group, covering every major legal quandary: liability, safeguards, engagement, harmonization, financing, and knowledge management. These are not shelf documents. They're meant as reference works for national regulators, industry consortia, and international organizations. Second, FELEX acts as the connective tissue, offering guidance to governments drafting or revising national fusion regulations, advising international standard setters, and even helping private entities structure their contracts and IP portfolios. Finally, FELEX is building a knowledge platform, a living, collaborative repository, capturing both explicit laws and tacit practical know-how, priceless for a sector where projects might run for decades, with generations of scientists and lawyers cycling in and out. This prevents loss of institutional wisdom, a problem that often cripples big science.
Before we wrap, let's look through a wider lens. Fusion, if realized at scale, means nothing less than an energy shakeup, clean, inexhaustible, more geopolitically stable. Is FELEX, through its legal fabric, just smoothing the pathway for this technology, or could it fundamentally influence how we think about governance in next-gen industries?
Outstanding question. FELEX is doing more than just lubricating the wheels for fusion. It's pioneering a model of anticipatory regulation, proactive, global, inclusive, that other high-stakes sectors could emulate, from artificial intelligence to bioengineering. It's a living experiment. How to design legal frameworks that are adaptable and robust, inviting innovation, but always keeping public interest front and center. Moreover, FELEX's commitment to diversity in membership, ideas, and engagement sets a benchmark for future international expert groups. This is not just legal theory. It is practical governance that could outlast the initial wave of fusion itself.
I'm energized and intrigued. To everyone listening, the FELEX special session, Proceedings of 2025, is not just a legal checklist. It's the script for a new era where law enables, rather than restricts, humanity's leap toward a cleaner, more connected future. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for sharing this deep dive. See you in the next one.